And I'll start with a story that I found really fascinating, a story about sort of a pretty well-known medicinal plant. And that plant is Mandrake, Mandragora officinalis. And that's what you see here. Mandrake is a solanaceous plant, meaning it's a cousin of tomatoes and peppers, the nightshades, which are amazing foods to us, but also contain some powerful poisons and some powerful medicines and some powerful spirit plants too. And Mandrake, I think, falls right in that latter category as a powerful medicine and a powerful spirit plant. Now, those of you who have heard about Mandrake have probably heard that it's an herb that, can definitely have a mind of its own, can definitely take us to strange and wonderful places, show us new and wonderful vistas. But one of the things that I first learned about Mandrake was that it was thought that the root itself had a living spirit inside it, which you could tell because when you pull the root up, it looks like a little human. And any of you who've seen the Harry Potter movies or read the Harry Potter books maybe have run into this quality, this root that when you try to pull it out of the ground, shrieks in terror with such intensity that it kills anyone who hears that scream. Well, this story is a little different. It's not about harvesting the mandrake root. It's about a man who was walking through the forest one day, and he's walking along, heading back through a forest path from the village back to his home, and he comes across this huge oak tree that he'd really never seen before. And, 20, 30 feet up in the lowest branches, he can see tangles of mistletoe in the oak leaves. And, the oak trees that harbor mistletoe are thought to be the most powerful of the oak trees. Mistletoe being sort of magical dew that crystallizes into plant form in the leaves of the sacred oak, just out of the air and out of the spirits moving through the air. And mistletoe and oak being two of the most sacred herbs for the sort of druidic tradition of Ireland and Europe. So as he notices this mistletoe up there, he has this thought and this feeling that, this is a special and a powerful place. And he looks down at his feet, and between the roots of the oak tree is this flowering mandrake with the purple flowers, just like the plant you see in front of you now. And, knowing the power of the mandrake, because these were times when people knew the power of these plants, and the fact that he's standing in front of an oak tree and the mistletoe is above him, this man just has this moment of sort of realization and connection and feels an incredible sense of place and power and meaning. Not exactly what kind of meaning, but just this sense of power and magic. And right at that moment, he hears a voice coming up from the roots, from the mandrake plant at his feet. And the mandrake is speaking to him because, of course, back then, and maybe still today, plants communicated directly with humans, for those who could hear. And the mandrake tells him, "I'm not for you to harvest, my friend, but if you come back tonight and you bring me meat and bread so I can eat my fill, you won't regret it." Now the man was very poor and he had very little to eat, but he heeded the words of the mandrake. He walked back to his home. He collected what little bit he could find, and he brought it back to the mandrake and said, "Well, here you go. I offer you this food, this meat and this bread as a gift." And the mandrake says, "Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Come back tomorrow." And the man walks back to his home and, he spends that night hungry. And when he comes back to the mandrake the next day, she's sitting there under the oak tree, kind of in the dappled shade of the forest. And she says, "I really appreciated your gifts yesterday. Bring me more meat and bread, and you won't be sorry." So for the second time, the man goes back home and he collects what he can find, and there's not much left. A little bit of dried meat and some crusty bread, and he brings it back to the mandrake that night. And the mandrake says, "Well, thank you again for your gifts. You've shown me your true devotion now 2 days in a row. And I'll tell you, from here on out, you must bring me meat and bread every single night. And if you fail once to do so, you will die." And the man says, "What? I brought you these gifts like it's the last food I have, and you're telling me now I have to keep doing this, and if not, you'll kill me?" Of course, he knew that Mandrake had this power, and he wasn't going to mess around with this plant. But he was very distressed because he didn't see a way out of this. The Mandrake said, "Don't worry. I forgot to tell you that if you do this, you will get back twice the amount of food that you bring me. So bring me what you have every night, and the next morning you'll find twice as much on your table." And the man went back, not quite knowing what to believe, not quite knowing or understanding what he'd gotten himself into. But the next morning when he woke up, he found twice the amount of food that he had brought to the Mandrake root. Fresh bread, golden and crusty, fresh meat, dried jerky sitting there waiting for him. He ate and had his fill, and there was still more left over to share with his neighbors. And that night he brought a little bit of that meat and that bread back to the Mandrake and said, "Here are my gifts to you again. I offer them with great gratitude." And the Mandrake said, "Same to you, and we'll see you again tomorrow." And so the story goes that the man kept going every single night, bringing this food back to the Mandrake, and the Mandrake kept putting meat and bread on his table for every single day for the rest of his life. The man lived happy and healthy and was able to share his abundance with his friends in the community. Now, my understanding is that he never failed on his promise and he kept bringing the gifts to the Mandrake root. But what I really love about this story is that it tells us a couple of things. First of all, this idea of the Mandrake grabbing the attention, or the oak and the mistletoe grabbing the attention of this guy as he was walking through the woods and just transfixing him and engaging him in communion and communication with that moment in time, with the spirits of nature and the plants that were there in that moment in time. So this engagement, first of all. And then I really appreciate the fact that almost on faith, the man was willing to bring gifts, to listen to what the Mandrake said and bring gifts back to this plant. And in so doing, also commit to this crazy job, right? With the threat, of course, of his life if he fails on the commitment. So there's this other piece too, right? This bondage that happened between the man and the Mandrake. But it was almost a willing bondage, because as soon as he realized that his food would be returned to him twice as much as he had given to the Mandrake plant, he realized that this really wasn't servitude. This really wasn't a prison for him, but it was a cycle of renewal and a cycle of abundance for him, where whatever he brought to the Mandrake was returned to him twofold. So this bondage that he had with the plant and with nature was something he was willing to engage in because of the rewards that came back to him. And he also was willing to give up his resources in order to get the ball rolling, so to speak, to have some skin in the game right away. And I think these are such fascinating elements because they're the key elements of what I want to talk a little bit about later, which is this gift cycle, which is ultimately how I think nature works. So there's 4 key pieces to the gift cycle, okay? The first is initiation. What the guy experienced when he saw the mistletoe in the oak tree and just was transfixed there in the forest. And then the Mandrake root came to him. That's the second part. You have to open yourself up once you've been initiated, right? Once you've had this experience, which we've all had, that first gift, right? Where we're like, holy moly, what was that? I felt like I was beyond me. I was part of something bigger for a moment there. For a moment, I felt immortal and connected to the biosphere, connected to a consciousness that is far beyond my own, right? Then we open up and we say, wow, if this can happen once, is it happening all the time? The answer is yes, it is, right? So the next part is we really have to open ourselves up so that we can receive more of those gifts, more of that energy, and to learn what it is that nourishes us specifically as our own beautiful incarnation, our own beautiful subset of this sort of massive, conscious, fractal flow that is happening in the world around us. Then comes the hard part. Then comes the work. Then comes the realization that we have to bring the bread and the meat to the Mandrake every single day for the rest of our lives. And if we don't do that, we'll be killed. And we may not be killed, but we'll slowly be diminished. We'll slowly see our vitality reduce. If we receive a gift, we become open to it, but then we don't commit to the hard work of engaging with what the gift has given us. So for those of us who are called to this conference this weekend and have felt that calling and are here and are open, right? I encourage you to really think about what that work might look like for you and what you're willing to commit to, because there will be a strong commitment and a lot of work. I never said that being vital and being well was something that we just did by sitting on the couch and lounging. To the contrary, it's the opposite. But hopefully, like any artist who has been inspired and has spent countless sort of sleepless nights burning the midnight oil and putting together their incredible artwork, knows it's work, but it's work that really is worth it, because it breeds what? This great sense of gratitude and this idea that we have to share that work out with our community, with our partners, with our friends, with the culture, with the ecology, right? And that's ultimately what the great gift cycle is. We become so filled by the work that we do that we are able to then dissipate it outward. We have so much vitality by having engaged with the wild, complex diversity of nature that we are able to then turn it back out into the world and increase the vitality and complexity and diversity of the world in turn. And then, of course, when we realize this, the cycle begins anew. And a new inspiration, period of opening, and period of work repeats itself. And this is happening inside every atom that makes up every molecule, that makes up every strand of DNA in our cells, every cell in our bodies, every tissue, our bodies, our families, our communities, all the way to the solar system, all the way to the galaxy. This cycle of dissipation is a gift cycle. And it starts with that ultimate gift, that attempt, that gift that's going to take, 32 billion years to actually give, that started 13 billion years ago and that we're a part of right now.